Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to unpack one of the most profound and frankly thrilling mysteries of ancient Egypt. When we think of the Great Pyramids, we usually just picture these massive, silent stone structures reaching up into the sky. But what if those walls weren't silent at all? What if they were literally vibrating with some of the most potent, ancient magic ever conceived by human minds? Well, today, we're exploring the pyramid texts. We're going to see how an accidental discovery completely flipped our understanding of Egyptian history, and how these ancient rulers engineered a highly specific, magical blueprint for cheating death. It's an absolutely fascinating journey, so let's explore what they left behind.
So, for the longest time, historians and archaeologists operated under a massive misconception. Seriously, if you asked an Egyptologist in the mid-19th century what was written inside the pyramids, they would have told you absolutely nothing. The historical consensus was that the Great Pyramids were entirely devoid of inscriptions. No hieroglyphs, no warnings, no spells. Zero. They were believed to be purely architectural marvels, grand, sure, but ultimately empty tombs. This assumption was so deeply ingrained that it actively discouraged explorers from even bothering to look for texts inside them. And that perfectly sets up the central mystery of our story today. How could a civilization that was so obsessed with recording their existence leave their greatest monuments completely blank?
That brings us to Section 1, An Unexpected Discovery. The story of how we found out the truth brings us to an almost reluctant breakthrough by an established figure named Auguste Mariette. Looking at this timeline, Mariette secured funding back in 1880, but it came with a strict, non-negotiable condition from the French government. He had to open at least one Saqqara pyramid. He did it purely out of bureaucratic obligation, fully expecting to find nothing but bare stone. But then, in May 1880, a man named Mohammed Shaheen opened the pyramid of Pepi I. And suddenly, the impossible happened. They found walls literally covered in texts. Mariette quickly sent copies to Gasta Maspero to translate, but tragically, he passed away in January 1881 before ever truly realizing the world-shattering magnitude of his discovery. Right after his death, his successor, Maspero, quickly took the reins, opening the pyramids of Unis and Teti and revealing even more of these astonishing inscriptions.
Moving right along, Section 2, the oldest texts.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that these aren't just random carvings or basic lists of kings. We are looking at the absolute oldest religious writings ever discovered in the world. Just notice the incredible precision of the hieroglyphs here, from the Pyramid of Unis dating way back to around 2300 BC. The Unis pyramid was the very first to feature these carvings, and it contained over 200 distinct declarations detailing everything from creation theories to really complex afterlife survival rituals. But here's what makes this mind-blowing. While the physical carvings are from 2300 BC, the language and the religious ideas they represent are vastly older. They reflect a deeply rooted system of belief that had likely been passed down through a long oral tradition for centuries before a single chisel ever struck these walls. As scholars finally began translating these ancient words, they noticed two distinct, sometimes overlapping views of the cosmos. On the one hand, you have the solar myths, which were contemporary to the pharaohs who commissioned the carvings. This is all about the journey where the dead king is led toward the sun god, Ra. But woven right into this is an older, perhaps much more ancient belief system, stellar mythology. This one isn't about following the sun. It's a profound journey directed toward the circumpolar stars up in the northern sky. And you might be wondering, why those specific stars? Well, because they never dipped below the horizon. To the ancient Egyptians, these never-setting stars were literally immortal, and joining them meant securing an eternal, unchanging existence. Which leads us directly into Section 3, Magic for Eternity. To actually achieve that eternity, the Egyptians relied on the literal, magical power of writing. They believed that carving a word into stone could physically manifest it into reality in the afterlife. The spells spoken by priests during the funeral, when etched into the walls, became this eternal, self-sustaining loop of magic meant to guarantee the pharaoh's resurrection and absolute power. And trust me, they needed this potent magic because the afterlife was not some peaceful resting place on a cloud. It was an absolute gauntlet. The dead king was going to face serious hazards, massive topographical obstacles to navigate, predatory animals just waiting to strike the vulnerable soul, and supernatural enemies lurking in the dark trying to sabotage the journey. Surviving that required an entire arsenal of magical weaponry. This brings us to one of the most fascinating psychological aspects of these carvings. Because the Egyptians believed writing brought things to life, carving the name of an enemy or a dangerous creature posed a massive risk. I mean, what if the hieroglyph of a snake suddenly came alive and bit the dead king? So what was their workaround? the magic of mutilation. Scribes would literally carve the hieroglyphs of enemies and dangerous animals cut in half or heavily mutilated. This functionally disabled them so they couldn't attack the king in the afterlife. Though, bizarrely enough, the Yunus pyramid, the very first one, is the one major exception where this mutilating rule was largely ignored. Go figure.
But it brilliantly illustrates how seriously they took this threat in the pyramids that followed. Just notice the spelling used here in the Pyramid of Tuti. Remember the god Seth? In Egyptian mythology, Seth is often the antagonist, a really dangerous and chaotic deity. To protect the pharaoh from Seth's disruptive magic, the scribes in Titi's pyramid point-blank refused to draw the animal associated with him. Instead, they wrote Seth's name entirely phonetically, using standard symbols. By refusing to give the Seth animal a physical form in the stone, they completely stripped it of its magical power to harm the king.
Let's move on to Section 4, Celestial Survival Guide.
So the crucial point is that when you look at this sequence, the incredibly dense index of these texts, hundreds of declarations as they call them, isn't just a storybook. It acts as a highly practical, interactive cheat sheet designed specifically to help the pharaoh transform from a mortal body into an Akh, a powerful, immortal spirit that would utterly dominate the next world. Every corridor, every single chamber was plastered with the exact spells needed at the exact right moment. The organization guides the soul through wildly specific sequential rituals. It starts with physical restoration, like the opening of the mouth ceremony, magically unsealing the dead king's lips so he could breathe and speak again. Then, you get an entire series of spells specifically dedicated to repelling venomous snakes. Finally, it moves into sustaining the king, ensuring a constant, magical flow of offerings like beer, fresh water, and purifying natron. It's quite literally a step-by-step manual for overcoming death.
And the texts bring these spells to life by pairing the magical words with highly specific, physical offerings that the priest would actually present. For the opening of the mouth, the texts specify using an iron awz, a tool literally used to pry open the jaws. But they also get incredibly symbolic, and honestly, a little humorous. To magically restore the pharaoh's smile, they offered 5 bunches of onions, which the text declares represent the white teeth of Horus. And to quench his eternal thirst, the spells conjure the ferment of Osiris, served specifically in a black MW stone cup full of beer. The physical object directly anchors the magical reality.
All of this brings us to the ultimate goal of this elaborate preparation, which is beautifully captured in this profound translation by scholar J.P. Allen. The duration of the king's life is eternal recurrence. His limit is eternal identity. Through these incredible texts, the pharaoh wasn't just hiding away in a tomb. He was actively transitioning from a life of inevitable physical decay into an existence of immutable eternal power. He became a force that only changed when he chose to. It leaves us with a pretty powerful question to consider. Thousands of years later, as we still read their words and marvel at their magic today, didn't they actually achieve exactly the eternity they were looking for? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I'll see you next time.